Welcome to the Verdict Zone. Today's case is a profound study in reciprocity and the echoes of cruelty, the unpaid debt. This story forces us to ask if experiencing the same suffering you once judged others for grants you a claim to their compassion, or if some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Our subject's life as a new mother was completely upended. Her partner cheated, the life she had built shattered, and she was left alone, scared, and overwhelmed. In her darkest hour, she turned to her friend, let's call her Amy. She needed help, a lifeline, even just a few hours of childcare to get back on her feet. But Amy refused. Not just refused, but judged her, coldly stating, "You should have kept a better eye on him. This is on you." Those words were a second betrayal, a knife twisted in an already gaping wound. The friendship, for all intents and purposes, died that day. Years passed. Life, as it does, moved on. Our subject rebuilt her world, found strength she never knew she had, and raised her child. Then, one day, the tables turned with a cruel sense of irony. Amy's husband passed away suddenly. In the aftermath of his death, a devastating secret came to light. Their entire marriage, the foundation of Amy's life, was built on a web of lies and infidelity. Amy was now the one who was shattered, overwhelmed, and alone, not with one child, but with four. And who did she turn to? The very friend she had cast aside years ago. Now, this is where the story gets incredibly complex. Our subject, remembering her own pain, didn't turn Amy away. She didn't mirror the cruelty she was once shown. Instead, she opened her heart and her home. For 6 long months, she provided comprehensive, unwavering support. She gave Amy money to cover bills. She cooked meals for the family. She spent countless hours on the phone, offering a shoulder to cry on, listening to the same cycles of grief and anger she herself had once navigated. She was, by all accounts, a model of grace and forgiveness, offering the very support she had been denied. She was a true friend when Amy needed one most. But every act of kindness has its limits, and every person has their boundaries. The support our subject provided was immense, but it was also finite. After 6 months of pouring from her own cup, she felt it was time for Amy to start finding her own footing. And that's when the pivotal request came. Amy asked our subject to become her regular, unpaid babysitter for her 4 children, so she could go back to work. It was the exact same ask, magnified fourfold, that our subject had made all those years ago. The one thing she had desperately needed and been so cruelly denied. Our subject thought long and hard. This wasn't about a single evening. This was a massive, ongoing commitment of time, energy, and emotional labor. It was a responsibility she wasn't prepared to take on. So, with as much kindness as she could muster, she said no. She explained her reasons, offering to help find other solutions, like paid childcare or family support. She drew a boundary. And that's when the new, fragile bridge they had been building collapsed into a fiery chasm. Amy's response was not one of understanding. It was one of outrage. She couldn't believe that after everything she was going through, her friend would deny her this one thing. And in her anger, she weaponized our subject's past pain against her. She accused our subject of being cold and unfeeling, throwing her own generosity back in her face. The argument escalated until our subject, pushed to her absolute limit, finally held up a mirror to Amy's past actions. She said, calmly but with the weight of years of hurt, "I'm sorry you feel that way. It must be so hard to be in this position and have someone you count on refuse to help with your kids." The words were a near-perfect echo of the judgment Amy had delivered years ago. The conversation ended. The silence that followed was deafening. So, let's audit this emotional ledger. On one side, we have Amy. Her initial entry is a massive debit, judgment, cruelty, and the refusal of critical help to a friend in crisis. Years later, she receives an enormous credit line from that same friend, 6 months of financial, emotional, and practical support. On the other side, we have our subject. She carries the initial wound of betrayal. She then extends an incredible amount of grace, a credit of kindness that far outweighs the original debt. Her only debit, if you can even call it that, is a single, specific refusal to take on a significant, long-term responsibility. She said no to one thing after saying yes to everything else. To help us understand the complex dynamics at play, we spoke to Dr. Anya Sharma, a psychologist specializing in relational ethics. She explained the concept of conditional support. She told us, when you've been deeply hurt by someone, any support you offer them later is often, consciously or not, conditional. The condition is that they recognize the past harm and don't take your current kindness for granted. The subject's support was an act of compassion, but it wasn't a blank check. Amy, by making the one demand that mirrored the original betrayal, essentially tried to cash a check she had no funds to cover. She failed to see the grace she was being given and instead saw it as an entitlement. Dr. Sharma also pointed out the psychological impact of Amy's initial blame the victim attitude. That kind of judgment creates a wound that doesn't just heal with time. It leaves a scar that can be easily reopened. When Amy was denied help, she defaulted to her old pattern of accusation, proving to the subject that she hadn't truly understood the depth of her original cruelty. We also consulted with philosopher Dr. Marcus Thorne, who debates the limits of moral obligation in friendships. He argued that friendship, while ideally based on unconditional love, operates on a principle of reciprocity. He said, general human compassion compels us to help someone in distress. However, the specific, deep obligations of friendship are built on a shared history of mutual support. Amy nullified that history with her initial betrayal. Our subject's 6 months of support were an act of profound moral generosity, going far beyond any obligation she had. She was essentially gifting Amy a new friendship. When Amy demanded the childcare, she wasn't asking for a favor between friends, she was treating the relationship as a transaction where her current need erased her past debt. Our subject had every right to refuse to engage in that transaction. So why did this one specific request become the fault line? Because it wasn't just about babysitting. It was a symbol. For Amy, it symbolized the ultimate test of our subject's forgiveness. For our subject, it symbolized the ultimate test of Amy's growth. By asking for that specific form of help, Amy showed she had no memory or regard for the pain she had caused. And by refusing, our subject wasn't being cruel, she was protecting herself. She was refusing to let herself be re-traumatized. Her final, mirrored response wasn't an act of revenge. It was a lesson. It was a painful, but necessary, demonstration of what Amy's own words felt like. It was a final, devastating receipt for an unpaid debt. This confrontation leaves us with a haunting question. When you extend compassion to someone who once denied you the same, are you building a new relationship, or are you merely allowing them to withdraw from an emotional debt they never intended to repay? The verdict here seems to lean towards the latter. Our subject did more than enough. She showed a capacity for forgiveness that few possess. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean you have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when that person is the one who handed you the matches. The ledger, in this case, is not balanced. Amy remains deeply in the red. Our subject closed the account, and in doing so, she finally found her own closure. Knowing when an account is closed is essential for peace. If you've ever struggled with the math of fairness in friendship, if you've ever wondered if you've given too much or not enough, you need this community. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for the verdict zone. We deliver verdicts that help you balance your own ledgers. Find your closure. Subscribe now.